Please welcome Zachary Herman, President of the North American Federation of Temple Youth.
As you have heard, it's been 16 years since we were last together in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we are blessed to be back. In so many ways, the values of Massachusetts are values we cherish as Reformed Jews everywhere. We are people of the book, at home in a city that houses world-renowned colleges and universities. We are committed to repairing what is broken in our world, and when it comes to LGBT equality and commitment to universal health care, Massachusetts has been a trendsetter. Tonight, we are honored to welcome Governor Charlie Baker, the latest in a line of Massachusetts leaders who have been a model for civic leadership. Since taking office in 2015, Governor Baker has engaged deeply and meaningfully with the Jewish community. He has stood with us when we have been the target of anti-Semitic attacks and celebrated with us in times of joy. He has spoken against efforts to delegitimize Israel. He has worked with our congregation to welcome refugees seeking safety and a better life. He is leading Massachusetts with vision and purpose, and increasingly playing an important role in the Republican Party and on the national stage. Long before his election as governor, Charlie Baker embodied the words of the great sage Hillel: "Do not separate yourself from the community." His record of service in the private and public realm demonstrates just how committed he is to his state and its well-being. We are honored to welcome him this evening. Thank you so much.
Hey, Zach. 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 This guy's here all the way from Portland, Oregon. That's a long way. And I just have to say, that was one of the best, I get a lot of introductions. That was one of the best introductions I ever got. And it was the kind that my dad would have liked and my mom would have believed. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. Well, let me first of all just start by welcoming you all to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which, as I'm sure you all know, according to U.S. News and World Report, is the #1 state in the United States. We're honored to have you here. And we especially hope that while you're here, you'll find time to enjoy our culture and our history and our communities. When I thought about what I might say tonight, I thought I would start with my mom, the Democrat, and my dad, the Republican, because they taught me many things, the biggest of which is that humility is a virtue and that growth comes from dialogue. Now, my parents canceled each other out for 60 years, okay? And in fact, my mom was too sick to vote in 2014. But in 2010, when I ran, I said, "Is this going to be the first time you and Dad vote for the same person? I mean, I am on the ballot after all." And my mom looked at me and she said, "You know, son, it is a secret ballot." But I grew up in a family where the dinner table was literally a laser light show of conversation and discussion, and where people were actually engaging one another in an attempt to understand and to learn and to grow. It wasn't character assassination. Nobody's motives were being questioned. It was a debate and a dialogue about means, not about ends. And the thing I took away from it most of all was that nobody has the corner on every great idea, and that sometimes, if you pay attention, people who don't think the same way you do can help you change your mind. And that if all you do is spend all your time talking to people you agree with about everything, it limits and inhibits your capacity for growth. And the other thing I took out of it was to celebrate diversity is to appreciate the work of our founders. When they put together this original Constitution here in the Commonwealth of Mass, they set it up to make it messy and difficult and complicated to get things accomplished. And they set up a big swath of minority rights because, as I said at the time, they were worried about the tyranny of the majority. And they built what I call a distributed decision-making model. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the fact that you have to find a way to work with somebody who's your friend today and your foe tomorrow and your friend the day after and your foe the day after that, that's exactly what they had in mind in the first place. And I would argue in many cases, if you appreciate and value this notion that voices, many voices, should be heard when you engage in the public square, you can accomplish a lot. Massachusetts has passed landmark energy legislation that makes big investments in solar and hydro and the largest offshore wind project on the East Coast on a bipartisan basis. We enacted a pregnant workers' protection law on a bipartisan basis. We enacted a pay equity law on a bipartisan basis. We just recently enacted and I signed a reproductive rights law on a bipartisan basis. And over the course of the past several years, we've made significant increases in investing in at-risk families and children. And we also passed major legislation to battle and fight the brutal opioid epidemic here in the Commonwealth. Now, that legislation passed unanimously. Not a single person in the House or Senate voted against that bill. And it was the work of a year's worth of work on the part of a lot of different people, led in many cases by families who literally have been through hell in dealing with this issue with their own family members and with friends and neighbors. And that legislation was adopted by the National Governors Association, and something that had never happened before. 46 other governors signed that legislation as a blueprint for dealing with the opioid epidemic in their own state. Now, the good news, and in this particular issue, everyone is always looking for good news because so much of it is bad. After 15 years of double-digit increases in deaths from opioid overdoses here in the Commonwealth, the first 9 months of 2017 over the first 9 months of 2016, deaths are down by 10%. First time in 15 years. Opioid prescriptions, which we put a whole series of rules and standards in place for, are down by 30%. Narcan, which is the overdose reversal drug, is available in far more places than it was previously and has been very effective in saving the lives of many, many people. And we put in place, for the first time, a core curriculum for anyone who graduates from dental school, nursing school, pharmacy school, or medical school around opioid therapy and pain management that you have to pass to graduate in the Commonwealth. Which is not to say, by the way, that we don't live in difficult times, because we do. As you all know, the language and the tone of public discussion at times has been brutal and difficult and depressing. Charlottesville, the recent desecration of Boston's Holocaust Memorial, which had stood proudly for 20 years with nary a scratch. And the irony to some extent on that was when we put that memorial up originally 20 years ago here in Massachusetts, people built a whole series of extra panes of glass in anticipation that at some point they might need to use them. But for 20 years, nothing ever happened until this year, and this year it happened twice. And I don't need to tell anybody in this room about the other acts of hate and violence that have been delivered upon so many people over their religion, their race, their culture, their gender identity, and in some cases, simply their way of life. It's one of the reasons why, after literally almost 20 years, I reestablished the Hate Crimes Task Force here in Massachusetts, bringing together religious leaders, community activists, and folks in public safety at the state, local, and federal level to start meeting and discussing these issues, to be as proactive as we possibly can in dealing with these concerns. I also believe there's a more fundamental issue at stake here, which I want to talk about for a minute. I led a delegation to Israel just about a year ago this time. And the delegation was designed to go over and learn from the folks there about cybersecurity, technology, digital healthcare, and what they saw as the next act in the internet. And the reason we went was because I believe digital healthcare has huge potential to be an enormous asset to patients and families and providers in the 21st century. But for it truly to be successful, people need to believe that their data and their information is secure and that the systems that they would rely on can be trusted. And with so much money and so many state sponsors investing in cyber terrorism, I thought we should go talk to the people who knew the most about this, which frankly were the folks in Israel and the folks at Tel Aviv University. So we took a group over there, and we had a wonderful experience on these issues, and we actually brought a bunch of folks back and did a follow-up conference at Harvard earlier this year to continue that discussion. But I also had a chance to visit Yad Vashem when I was there. And it's unlike any museum I've ever been to in my life, because it's not designed to be the kind of place that you just go in and you wander around and see what they have. It's a journey. They set that museum up so you walk in the door and you start in the late 1800s. And you work your way through that museum into the early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s, and over that period of time, as you walk through the museum, you can see the elements that built brick by brick, day by day, community by community, person by person, what ultimately led to the Holocaust. It's all there. And it starts with the pebble in the water, which is why it's so important in this day and age that we all take seriously acts of violence, aggression, and hate against any particular group. Because if you leave it there, it will grow. And if it grows, we all suffer. Now, Israel, as you all know, is an amazing country. And somebody said to me, what was the most interesting thing about it? I said, I've never been to a place that has the capacity to honor its past, which is spectacular and important, and at the same time, rush at 1,000 miles an hour toward the future. It is truly a great nation filled with people who are doing amazing things. And I also had a chance to visit the Western Wall when I was there. And I actually happened to be there on the Sabbath. And somebody had told me before I went that I should write something down, a prayer, to put into the wall when I got there, which I thought was a weird request, but I did it anyway. And I wrote a note. It was a prayer for a friend of mine who has a son who has a terminal illness. So I walked down to the wall. There's a lot of people there. It's dusk. It's cold out. I walk up and I put my hands on it. And the wall was warm. Felt alive. It's the most unusual experience I can remember. And I took that piece of paper and I put it in the wall. And I really believed at that moment that it meant something. It was faith. And I understood for the first time why that wall was so important to the Jewish community. And I understood why that wall was so important to anybody who believes in a higher power and who wants to be able to practice freely their faith. As I stood there, I thought about the people some 400 years ago who got in a rickety boat and sailed across an ocean to practice their faith freely here in this country. Faith is an incredibly powerful tool around which people can build great and meaningful lives. And if they follow the teachings of those who share their faith, and they believe that others should have the freedom to follow their teachings as well, it gives everybody a sense that there is something bigger than just themselves in the moment here. And that they're playing on a larger stage with an opportunity to be part of something great. Freedom of speech, of religion, of the press. Those aren't just words. And properly understood and appreciated, they create an open door to diversity of opinion, of culture, of religion, and they make it possible for very different people to find common ground on which they can create and do great things. It's to be celebrated. Now, my favorite book all time is a book called To Kill a Mockingbird, which was written by Harper Lee. The hero is a trial lawyer named Atticus Finch, played by Gregory Peck in the movie, by those of you who are old enough to remember that. At one point in the book, Atticus Finch turns to his daughter, Scout, and says, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." I have this unique opportunity as a public figure holding a statewide office to try to find opportunities every day to walk around inside somebody else's skin and see things from their point of view. It's an honor that I cherish. And I wake up all the time absolutely stunned that the people of Massachusetts gave me this chance to share with them and to walk around in their skin and to understand where they're coming from and where their point of view takes them. Part of why I'm here tonight is because I believe that organizations like yours and people like you get that. You believe in the notion that discussion is good, that debate is good, that persuasion is good, and that honor and respect for more than one point of view is good. And then in the end, we get stronger when we walk around in somebody else's skin and learn a little bit about somebody else's point of view. I really hope you all have a wonderful time here. This is a great city and a great state. And I really appreciate what you folks are trying to do every single day on behalf of the communities and the people you serve. God bless.